Hey everybody, it's Georgia Rose from Zenkuda. I am your psychic astrologer, and I want to come into this video and talk to you a little bit about the new moon that's coming up on August 23rd. It's going to be early in the morning, probably around between, I'd say maybe 3 a.m.-ish in the New York area and the East Coast, and of course if you're on your West Coast, it'll be around 11 p.m. So Virgo energy. So this is a really interesting new moon because it's happening at 0 degrees of Virgo. And the sun goes into Virgo the same day, so the sun is at 0 degrees of Virgo as well. So what does that mean? When we have the sun and the moon both going into Virgo at exactly the same moments, it amplifies that Virgo energy. So this is going to be a new moon that's really bringing us the Virgo story. What is the Virgo story? Well, first of all, the new moon is also aspecting other planets in the chart right now for the current chart of the moment. So we're going to have activations to Pluto, which brings everything to the surface for transformation. We're going to have some aspects to Saturn and Neptune, which are in the 1st degree of Aries. Pluto, by the way, is in the 1st degree of Aquarius. And we also have a square to Uranus, which is in the 1st degree of Gemini. So we've got all of this Aquarian, Gemini, Aries, and Virgo energy all in the beginning of the signs. So it's really newness. It's a shift. We're feeling the world shift in a very rapid, very accelerated place. And so the real part of this new moon is that Virgo story. So we've got Uranus squaring that Virgo story now, which means that maybe something's going to happen that'll be kind of unpredictable. We've got Pluto aspecting the Virgo story that is going to bring it from the depths. And then we've got Saturn, Neptune, building a fence around and bringing structure to our belief systems and our spiritual part of us. So I wouldn't be surprised if some people begin to regress in this energy, because a lot of Virgo story is about unhealed wounds and unhealed things that are resolved, unprocessed emotion especially. Virgo is the place in our life where we've had abduction. What has been abducted from your life where you have to process grief or stress and you haven't done that yet? Where in your life is the Virgo story of losing your innocence, where you had to really come into something that was taken away from you or revealed to you in a way that was no longer childlike? And sometimes we have parents in our life or situations in our life that keep us infantile, and we don't like to admit that, and we don't want to see it. And so it becomes buried, but yet we play those roles in our life. And isn't 2025 so much about releasing roles that really aren't authentic? The things we do and the obligations we have and the things we were conditioned about. Like today, I decided I'm sitting out here and it's really nice and I'm relaxing a little bit, and so I'm just going to pop a video in because I'm feeling the energy. I can really talk about Virgo energy and the Virgo story really well. And I immediately was going to go in and put makeup on and comb my hair. That's a Virgo energy. That's a construct that's like, no, you have to be perfect if you're going to do something. And as a result of it, things become abducted from us that we don't do, right? It could be that simple. Maybe that's your story. It could also be a story where you've actually had a loss of a loved one, a really horrific breakup, or a death, or some kind of a loss, and you've never fully processed those emotions because you don't want to lose the innocence of it. And in confronting grief, confronting loss, we have to give up our innocence. That doesn't happen to us. I went through a lot of that when I was diagnosed with cancer. I thought, but I have this beautiful life and I don't want to be a statistic. I've worked my whole life to stand out, right? And now I'm just a number. I'm just person who's sick and needs help from strangers. How could that be my life, right? So I had to work through a lot of things that were abducted from me, and in other places in my life too. I didn't have an easy childhood. I had a lot of abandonment, and I had to process and work through a lot of those emotions in order to come into the competency that I can be a good partner, a good person in a relationship or in a friendship. That's the Virgo story. It keeps us in a self-protection, in running a complex that has something to do with a loss or something in our life that has been some kind of an abduction. And in pushing it away and not confronting it, what happens is we seek perfection everywhere, because when something is imperfect, then we start to see other things are imperfect. Also, with Virgo complexes and the Virgo stories that we run, we become the critic, because it's safer to criticize things than see the imperfection. It's safer to not lose the idealism that something has to be a certain way and give up that innocence of it's broken, it hurts, it doesn't feel right, there's something I don't understand here. So instead of going into that energy, we become the critic. And many of us grew up with parents that did that to us, right? That was the parenting style. There's a tremendous amount of people on the planet right now who were born with Pluto in Virgo, myself included. Pluto in Virgo is from the 1950s all the way to 1972. So we run these complexes of the abductions in our life and not wanting to face loss, not wanting to process certain emotions that have grief and the Virgo story attached to them. But the true story of Virgo is finding competence through loss. And just like going through my cancer journey, I found strength I never knew I had. I found wisdom that I never knew I had. And I've brought that into the world in a lot of my spiritual work and my what I call my God work, and in the healing work that I do with cancer patients and things like that, because I've had that experience and it brought me to a competence. Exactly what happened when my whole life fell apart in 2011, and I had to come back from losing almost everything that I valued in my life, people and places and things and relationships and abundance, and being so terribly frightened to face that Virgo story of that abduction of things from my life. But once I stepped into it and started the journey of the process of the grief and the emotion, then my confidence came through, and this beautiful inner wisdom and inner knowing. And that's the Virgo story. No one can keep grief in forever. It's going to come out at some point in our lives or in our next lifetime. It has to be learned. There's lessons inside grief. And I remember I never dealt with grief in my life, and I had tremendous loss. And then when it all culminated in 2011 with some things in my own life, I remember, well, I was finally going through this and working with a grief therapist and dealing with a lot of the trauma that I had had throughout my life. I remember having a loss during that time. It was a fresh loss. It was someone who was very dear to me. She had been like a mom. And at one time in my life, she called me her daughter. And then I had found out that she had passed away, and I hadn't been in touch with her for a little while, probably a couple of years. And I remember that day leaving my office. I actually wrote a blog about it, and taking a walk in the park by the lake by where I live, and actually feeling grief in my body. And because of the practice I had been in for the year prior, and learning how to process my emotion and understanding grief and the Virgo story of my life, as I'm walking around the lake, I remember thinking, I had a feeling in my tummy, and I was getting a slight headache, and then I had all this emotion that was rising of this loss that I had just learned about. And I realized, and I said to myself in a small voice, oh, you're grieving. You will grieve now. And I had a really long walk that day through my village and around my lake, remembering her and the memories, and realizing a lot of things about love, transcending the realms. And through the grieving process and the abduction story, I became more compassionate, more empathetic for myself, and stepped into self-love. And that's the Virgo story in a nutshell. So we want to deal with whatever's unprocessed. We want to deal with the situations that keep us infantile, that keep us infantilized. And sometimes we deal with elderly parents, and our relationship with them is not an honest or authentic one to who we are now, because they want to keep us children, right? I mean, I remember when my mom was 80-something years old before she passed, and I'd walk into the nursing home, and she had dementia, but no matter how old I was, and no matter how much her disease took hold of her, she would always say to me, if it was wintertime, you don't have a hat on, you need to wear a hat. And I used to, at first when that used to happen, I'd get annoyed because, I'm this much old, right? And after a while, I was grateful for it, because I said, oh, she thinks I'm a child, and that's good for her, But there's relationships like that where we play the role of the child and we're no longer the child. And so maybe you have a relationship like that in your life where it's time for you to step into the adulthood in that relationship with your parent and really be authentic as to who you are and make decisions and have those conversations with them that are adult conversations, not minimalizing your life or diminishing yourself, but showing them who you really are in a beautiful way and stepping into those beautiful places where maybe they can celebrate you and who you are today. And that's true for all our relationships. And the Virgo story sometimes keeps us captive in that not wanting to lose our innocence. And so we will infantize other people as well, our own children, or maybe, we have a relationship that keeps us in that innocence of our life and we don't like to face responsibility. And the Virgo story is one where we step into that competency, we truly find our authentic person inside ourselves. I'm just going to look down at my notes for a minute. Yes, I did take some, even though I was sitting outside here on this beautiful day. So in order to step into the true Virgo journey and the true journey that this new moon is going to bring, we need two things. First of all, we need to witness what has happened to us. And that doesn't mean we have to go to the person that is part of the abduction or that caused a loss or maybe, gave us, grief. It doesn't mean that. It means we have to step into a place in our own lives where we witness what happened to us. And then the other part of that is that we need someone to listen. And it doesn't mean we need someone to fix it. It doesn't mean we need someone to step into our lives and make it different. It simply means that we need someone to sit. Some people call that holding space. And then after you tell them your story, like, this is what happened to me when I was a child, or my father abandoned us, or I had a great love in my life and this is what happened and I lost it, or whatever your story may be. I feel like I've never been seen or heard. Or after you just speak it to that person and tell them what happened to you, allow them to simply hug you for a really long time, maybe 10 minutes, which is a long hug. And they don't have to say anything. They've just witnessed your story and you were seen. And now you can step out of that unprocessed part of it and into the process of becoming authentically stronger in your own competency. And that's going to happen a lot in this new moon. That energy is going to come up. It's probably coming up for a lot of us already. I'm recording this on the 19th of August. I had a little bit of that this morning. I went to a funeral mass for someone that was very dear to me in my life. And it seems like loss is coming up in a lot of ways lately. It was also the birthday yesterday of someone that was a very prominent person in my life that I lost. And I had a lot of memories come back on me, and I realized there were some things about my relationship with her that I had unprocessed. And with the funeral mass this morning, and so emotion came and I let it come. And so that's processing. We have to do that. In this new moon, a lot of unprocessed things are going to come up. It doesn't have to be painful in the point of repulsiveness. It doesn't have to be ugly. It can be beautiful when you release it, and especially if you have someone that you trust that can just listen and maybe just hug you afterwards and say, I'm really sorry that happened to you. And nothing more needs to be said. We don't need to stay in the victim part of it. And that's what a lot of this energy we have now with Neptune and Saturn going back to Pisces, and these Moon and Sun in Virgo these next few days is really about releasing the victim mentality, and where through keeping ourselves in a state of unprocessed emotions, we keep playing the victim over and over again. And another thing about Virgo energy with this new moon is also many times we don't even realize it, and that's why witnessing our behaviors and our complexes is so important. But sometimes we don't even realize it, but we gravitate to, or we're attracted to, relationships that keep us infantile or keep us in regression, where we don't have to take responsibility for our lives. Not to get gender specific, but I do see that a lot in people who identify in a very feminine way, especially in my age group, where, a lot of women look for a rescue, really. It's what we were conditioned to find and think about, right? And men are the protectors, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a natural order to life. But at the same time, if we're in relationships, and men do this too sometimes because they want to be mothered, right? A lot of men do it too in my generation. I think what I see or what I experience is the younger generation They have different identities with that kind of playing out. Anyway, that's my opinion. Don't write me a bunch of letters. But I think that there's a lot more liberation and independence in the younger generations than people in their 50s and 60s. And if you're in a relationship that's keeping you in the loop of childhood, in the loop of being a child or childlike, where you're gravitating towards someone who you're going to for protection, or so that you don't have to face your fear and anxiety and your competency. If you are in a relationship like that, you really want to start working through your unprocessed emotion so that you can step out of those relationships, because you aren't ever going to reach your competency when you are staying in your childhood trauma, when you're staying in your childhood patterns, and when you're staying in your childhood surroundings. Like, don't replay the childhood, because when doing that, you're staying childlike and you're not being competent. And the Virgo story is one where we learn our competency through facing the loss of innocence, the loss of whatever was the abduction in our life. And a lot of times the way this will play out is we become the critic, we become the cynic, we criticize everything, we're that negative person. Or we become the Pollyanna and we think everything's wonderful, right? Either way, it's a way of denying the maturity and the arc of development in our life where we become adults. So what happens, and what beautiful culmination of the Virgo story is that once we process the emotions, we are competent enough to step out of our childlike type of behaviors. Then what happens is we not only become the adult in our own life and we become competent, we find this beautiful strength within us where those critics that we had in our childhood and the things we were criticized and our striving for perfection is diluted because we know who we are and we're strong enough to overcome the criticism in life. And so it's a beautiful story of stepping into our own authentic self and our own strength of who we're really meant to be. So don't be afraid to step out of whatever that childhood mechanism is that you keep reliving, because that's where a lot of our trauma lies. And once we process it, have it witnessed, and move on from it, we really become the master of our life and we live in our own agency. You know, like when I see clients, I often say to them, they tell me their story and I say, well, you know, sometimes their parent has even passed. And I say, well, how long is your dead mom or your dead dad or your dead uncle or whoever going to keep running your life? Because that's what's really happening, right? We're looking for these feelings of being seen or trying to find comfort in some way. And what it really is we're just denying ourselves, giving it to ourselves because we're staying childlike. And childlike doesn't mean, you know, you're sitting in a corner eating a lollipop. Childlike simply means, you know, we're shirking the responsibility in our life. We've got someone who's taking care of us, or we've got somebody who is going to do something for us that we really should be doing ourselves. Or we're gravitating towards a situation because it's easy, right? We don't really have to do anything with it, right? I do it too in certain instances. Or we allow other people to make decisions for us because that means we don't have to make them, right? We don't want that responsibility. Oh, I'll just keep pushing the can down the road till someone else picks up the wheel, right? Picks up the can. So really those situations are going to come forward in this energy because Pluto's going to bring them from the depth, and the Virgo energy is going to be like, okay, you're going to learn through loss now. You're going to learn your competency through loss. We've given you loss a few times and you didn't get it, so we're going to do it again, so you have to stand on your own 2 feet. And when you really start unpacking this, you'll see the pattern, because Neptune and Saturn are absolutely going to show it to us. The pattern is something that has been happening a lot in your life. Like maybe you go through the same type of relationships, or maybe you keep having the same argument with your parent or child, or, you know, maybe there's a scenario where you can't seem to move something forward in your life. You keep ending back in the same situation. It's the Virgo complex that we're running. And I think that's about it. I don't think there's anything else I want to say about this energy. It does come in on the 22nd, 23rd, so it's towards the weekend, but we have such powerful energy in the universe right now that this is an energy that you're probably feeling already. So the best way to utilize this energy is, you know, step into quiet time where you are really thinking about the patterns in your life. Virgo complexes are usually run in patterns, and think about, where do I really need to witness what is causing this repetition, this loop, this revolution? and then use it to be actually the seeding moment of a revolution in your life where you no longer do those things anymore. I recently had an incident where someone was in conflict with me, and they started to act in a way that was very repetitive of previous ways that we always reacted together. This was in my family. And I completely stepped out of it. And I said, no, our relationship is not going to be this. And I removed myself and waited a couple of days and then resolved it. Because I know the story that gets run, and I am not going to be in that story anymore. And we have control over our lives. We have control over the complexes that we run, even when it involves other people, because we are in agency over ourselves. And that's what we need to do when we finally face the loss of innocence. We face the abductions that have occurred in our life. We face those traumas and those complexes that we're burying under behavior patterns that keep us immune to doing the work, processing the emotion to get through them. So if you'd like to know what the Virgo story is in your chart, how to process that emotion and how to move forward from it, I can do that through a reading, astrologically, by looking at your birth chart. We look at your astrology and I can tell you what the story is, and we can work through it together, collaborate so that you really have insight into your own inner knowing. It's not what I know. I can point you in certain directions using the chart, but it's going to awaken your inner knowing so you know exactly what the solutions are in your life and where you can move yourself forward to step into your full potential and really start living Zenkuda. So thank you so much for listening, watching, and supporting my work. If you'd like a reading, go on zenkuda.com, or you can watch me on any of the social media platforms. I do a podcast every Monday night live at 7 p.m. on Strong Island Television on YouTube, and you can also find replays of that on every podcast platform imaginable. You can even ask Amazon Alexa to please play the latest podcast with Georgia Rose from Zenkuda. So thank you so much, and I will see you on the Soul Space Monday night. I'm on hiatus till September, taking my vacations, and we're doing best of shows. But you know where to find me, and I'm always doing these videos and things. So hopefully we're going to have a beautiful Virgo energy coming in. Virgo is also a beautiful energy for deciding what's useful and what's not useful. So this weekend's a great weekend, not only to clean out our inner self, but also to clean out the closets, the things around you, get rid of the clutter, start reorganizing. You know, Virgo is that autumn harvest time when we pull the wheat from the chaff, meaning what we can discard goes in one pile and what we can bring with us into the future, all our wisdom and knowledge and experience goes into another. So I'll see you Monday nights on the Soul Space at 7 o'clock, and maybe I'll pop on another YouTube video before the end of the month. So stay tuned and please subscribe. Thanks.